The first time my mother said my daughter was not real family, she said it softly, quiet enough for the adults to pretend they did not hear it. But my daughter heard every word. It happened the afternoon of my grandmother's memorial, right there in my parents' dining room, while everyone was balancing paper plates and fake sympathy. My 9-year-old daughter, Mia, had been standing beside the memory table, looking at a silver locket that used to belong to Grandma Eleanor. She did not touch it. She just smiled and said, "Grandma told me one day I could keep that because it has little flowers on it like the ones in her garden." My mother turned so fast her chair legs scraped the floor. "That locket is for real granddaughters," she said. The room went silent in that slippery, cowardly way family rooms do when somebody cruel says exactly what everyone knows they should challenge, but no one wants the hassle. My father did not correct her. My brother looked down at his drink. My sister-in-law suddenly became very interested in stacking napkins.
Mia frose.
She had heard enough in foster homes, in waiting rooms, in whispered adult conversations to understand the difference between being tolerated and being wanted. Her face did not crumple. That would have been easier. It just changed, like a light quietly going out. I asked my mother, "What did you just say?" And she had the nerve to sigh. "You know what I mean, Claire. She is your daughter, legally, yes. But this is family history. Blood matters. Blood matters." Grandma Eleanor had not even been buried for 24 hours, and already my parents were dividing the room into who counted and who didn't. I took Mia's hand. I did not scream. I did not argue. I just looked at the locket, then at my mother, and said, "You may want to rethink that sentence." She gave me a tight little smile, the kind she used when she thought she had already won. What she did not know was that 3 months earlier, my grandmother had handed me an old blue atlas and said, "If they ever make that little girl feel less than, open this." I had laughed back then. That afternoon, I stopped laughing. My name is Claire Bennett. I am 35, a high school guidance secretary, and the mother of a little girl I fought harder for than anything else in my life. Mia came to me at 6 years old through foster care. By the time the adoption was final, she already knew how to pack a backpack in under 2 minutes, how to eat fast in case food disappeared, and how to smile at adults before deciding whether they were safe. No child should come into your life carrying survival like a second skin, but she did. My grandmother, Eleanor, loved her instantly. Not politely. Not performatively. Not with that shallow, "children are a blessing" voice people use when they want credit for kindness without doing any of the work. Grandma loved Mia like she had been waiting for her. She planted a small rose bush in the backyard and told Mia it was hers. She taught her how to fold dumpling dough, how to deadhead marigolds, how to spot cardinals in the hedge by listening before looking. She never once said adopted. She said granddaughter. My parents never adjusted. To them, adoption was a technicality. Something charitable. Something I had done because my marriage had collapsed, my life had gone sideways, and I was, as my mother once put it, trying to build a family out of scraps. Grandma heard that sentence too. She never forgot it. About 3 months before she died, I drove her to a cardiology appointment. On the ride back, she was unusually quiet. Then she asked if Mia still carried that tiny stuffed rabbit everywhere. I laughed and said yes, usually by one ear. Grandma nodded, looking out the window. Then she said, "Good. A child ought to know what belongs to her." When we got back to her house, she took me into her study. She pointed to a blue atlas on the bottom shelf, thick with dust and completely out of place because she had not traveled anywhere in 20 years. "If people show you who they are after I'm gone," she said, "do not argue with them. Open that." I thought she meant a letter, a keepsake, some old family story. So when my mother called my daughter not real family at the memorial, that blue atlas came back to me like someone striking a match in the dark. By sunset, I was standing on my grandmother's porch with Mia beside me and a key still warm in my hand. Grandma's house smelled like cedar and lavender, exactly the way it always had. That nearly undid me right there. Mia went straight to the sunroom where the plants used to be because grief is strange in children. They look for the shape of things first. I walked into the study, knelt in front of the bottom shelf, and found the atlas exactly where she had said it would be. It was heavier than a book should have been. Inside, the center pages had been cut clean into a rectangle. Nestled in that hollow space was a large cream envelope, sealed with a gold sticker pressed with the letter E. My hands started shaking before I even opened it. Inside were three things. The first was a handwritten note in Grandma Eleanor's sharp, slanted script. "Claire, if you are reading this, then someone has done exactly what I feared. Do not waste your breath defending Mia to people who measure love with a ruler. Take this to Martin Feld. He has the other copy. And remember, family is built by keeping a child safe, not by counting whose face she resembles." The second was a photograph. It showed Grandma in her garden, one arm around Mia, both of them filthy with potting soil and grinning. On the back, Grandma had written, "My granddaughter." Entirely. The third was the will. Not a draft. Not notes. An executed, signed, witnessed will dated 8 months before her death. I sat down hard in Grandma's desk chair and read it twice. Her previous estate plan, the one everybody assumed was still valid, divided most things between her 2 surviving children, my father and my aunt. That was what my mother had probably built her confidence on. But this document changed everything. Grandma's house would be sold, and the proceeds divided equally among her grandchildren. Then came the line that made my chest tighten. For purposes of this will, the term grandchildren includes all children legally adopted by my descendants, without distinction, reduction, or challenge. Any beneficiary who disputes the standing of an adopted child shall forfeit their share entirely. I stared at that sentence for a long time, not because it was generous, because it was targeted. She had known. There was also a separate education trust for Mia. Not huge, but real. Real enough to matter. Real enough to tell a little girl, in legal language, that somebody had planned for her future on purpose. From the sunroom, Mia called out, "Mom, are we okay?" I swallowed hard and said the truest thing I had said all day. "We are now." Part 4. Martin Feld turned out to be a probate attorney in his 60s with a calm voice and the kind of office that smells like paper, coffee, and expensive patience. The moment he saw the envelope, his expression changed. "I wondered when this would surface," he said. That was not what I expected to hear. He explained that Grandma Eleanor had updated her will after one very specific Thanksgiving. That was the year my mother told Mia not to put her handmade ornament on the family tree because those go to biological grandchildren first. Mia had been 7. Grandma had walked straight into the kitchen, taken the ornament box off the counter, and hung Mia's crooked felt star dead center on the tree herself. A week later, she called Martin. "I told her to store the original with me," he said, "but she insisted on keeping one copy in a place only you would think to look." Then he reached into a file drawer and pulled out a certified duplicate. Same signatures. Same witnesses. Same clause. I asked the question that had been building in my throat since the memorial. Did she know they would do this after she died? Martin gave me a long look. She believed your parents would become very bold once she was no longer there to interrupt them. That sounded exactly like Grandma. The legal problem was simple and ugly. My father had already submitted an older will to probate 2 weeks earlier. Conveniently, it was the one written before Mia's adoption was finalized and before Grandma revised everything. Whether he knew about the newer will or was counting on no one finding it, I still don't know. But once Martin filed the updated document with the court, the entire inheritance process stopped cold. My mother called me before I even made it home. Her voice was sugar poured over broken glass. "Claire, darling, Martin says you're making some confusion over paperwork." I said, "It's not confusion. It's Grandma's final will." Silence. "Then, you really would drag this family through court over a technicality?" Technicality. That was the word she used for my daughter. For a child. For legal parenthood. For Grandma's written wishes. I looked out at my parking lot, sat in my car, and felt something in me become very still. "No," I said. "I'm dragging this family into the truth." And for the first time in my life, my mother had no immediate answer. If you have never watched polite relatives turn vicious over inheritance, congratulations. It is like seeing church ladies bare their teeth. Within 48 hours, the calls started. My aunt said Grandma must have been confused. My cousin said I was exploiting a grieving situation. My brother, who had stayed silent at the memorial like a man auditioning for furniture, finally texted me. Mom says you're trying to use Mia to steal blood family money. Tell me that's not true. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I saved it. Because that was the thing about everybody in my family. They loved pretending their cruelty was principle. They said bloodline when they meant hierarchy. They said tradition when they meant exclusion. They said fairness when they meant keep the child at the edge of the photo. Mia noticed the tension, of course. Children always do. That night she sat at the kitchen counter doing spelling homework while I pretended not to read the same email 3 times. Then she asked, very quietly, if Grandma wrote it down, why are they still mad? I put my laptop away. Because some people only like rules when the rules help them, I said. She nodded like that made more sense than I wanted it to. 3 days later, my parents came to my house unannounced. My mother did not sit. My father did not remove his coat. That told me they had not come to reconcile. They had come to control. My father said, withdraw the filing. My mother added, this obsession is hurting everyone. I almost laughed at the word obsession because no one had seemed concerned about family harmony when they were telling a 9-year-old she did not belong. Then my mother tried a different approach. There's still time to handle this privately. Mia doesn't need to know every unpleasant detail. If you stop now, we can make sure she receives something appropriate. Something appropriate. Like love was a party favor. Like dignity was theirs to distribute. I stood up and opened the front door. You already told my daughter exactly what you think she's worth, I said. Now the court can decide what Grandma thought. My father's face darkened. My mother went pale. And as they walked out, she said one last thing over her shoulder. This is why people say adoption complicates everything. I looked straight at her and said, no, cruelty complicates everything. Then I closed the door. The probate hearing was set for a Thursday morning, and the courtroom was smaller than I imagined. Small enough that nobody could hide behind performance for very long. Martin handled most of it, which was good because if I had spoken too early, I might have said something less elegant than the law prefers. My parents' attorney argued predictably. He suggested the updated will had surfaced too conveniently. He implied Grandma had been emotional, influenced, and possibly pressured by me after my adoption. He called the language unusual. He called the clause punitive. Martin stood up and dismantled him piece by piece. He produced the certified duplicate from his office file. He produced the witness affidavits. Then he produced something I had not even known existed, a short video from the day Grandma signed the will, recorded by Martin's paralegal because, in his words, your grandmother believed in future-proofing. On that screen, my grandmother sat upright in a navy cardigan and looked directly into the camera. My name is Eleanor Bennett, she said clearly. I am of sound mind, and I am changing my will because some members of this family confuse blood with character. My granddaughter Mia Bennett belongs to this family as fully as any child born into it. If anyone tries to tell her otherwise after I'm gone, let this document answer for me. You could feel the air change. My mother looked like someone had slapped her. My father stared at the table. Then the judge asked the question that mattered most. Did the decedent have a consistent relationship with the adopted child in question? Martin smiled slightly. He handed over school recital programs, birthday cards, photographs, trust paperwork, and one particularly lethal piece of evidence. A Christmas card from my mother to Grandma 3 years earlier complaining that Eleanor was spoiling Claire's foster kid as if she were actual family. My mother had written it in her own hand. The judge read it twice. Then she ruled. The updated will was valid. The older will was revoked. The no-challenge clause would be enforced. Any beneficiary contesting Mia's standing lost their share entirely. My father closed his eyes. My mother whispered, no. But the judge was not finished. She also ordered the education trust funded immediately and appointed a neutral executor because, as she put it, this family has demonstrated an unusual talent for making children pay for adult prejudice. I will remember that sentence for the rest of my life. Outside the courthouse, my mother finally broke character.
No tears. No softness.
Just fury. She turned you against us, she snapped, meaning Grandma. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something that should have hit me years earlier. People who need a child to feel small are not strong. They are just desperate to stand on something weaker. No, I said. You did that yourselves. My father tried one last time. This wasn't necessary. I almost answered him with every memory I had. Every Christmas, where Mia's stocking was smaller. Every family photo where someone accidentally forgot to call her over. Every birthday card signed only with my name, as if my daughter were a guest I might stop bringing. Instead I said, it became necessary the moment you taught her to question whether she belonged. Then I walked away. We used Mia's trust for school later, just like Grandma planned. Not for luxury. For stability. For braces, tutoring, summer camp, and eventually college savings. The kind of ordinary support that feels extraordinary when somebody gives it without making you beg. And the locket? Martin mailed it to me 6 weeks after the estate was settled. Grandma had named personal items too. The silver one with the tiny flowers went to Mia. I gave it to her on the back porch one spring afternoon while she was repotting seedlings the way Grandma taught her. She opened the box, stared at it, and whispered, "For real?" I smiled. "Yes," I said. "For real." She wore it to school the next day under her shirt, close to her collarbone like a private promise. We do not spend holidays with my parents anymore. That is not bitterness. That is policy. Mia is 12 now, taller, louder, safer. She laughs from her stomach. She leaves crumbs everywhere. She does not ask whether she belongs. And sometimes when I think about that memorial, about that awful sentence my mother thought would define my daughter, I remember what actually lasted. Not the insult. Not the courtroom. Not even the money. What lasted was this. One woman saw the cruelty early, put the truth in writing, and made sure a little girl would one day grow up with legal proof that love is not lesser just because it arrived through a different door. That was my grandmother's revenge. Not rage. Precision. And honestly, it was beautiful.